Welcome to Riding the Trauma Train, or welcome back if we've shared this space before. I'm Lydia, your host and fellow passenger in this journey of self-healing, inner strength and personal growth. This podcast is a safe, judgment-free space dedicated to the realities of living with and healing from trauma. Through personal stories and in-depth conversations with special guests, including therapists, healers, practitioners, and fellow survivors, we look at what healing can truly look like in everyday life. We explore realistic healing journeys and share simple, sustainable practices and actionable tools to support your well-being along the way. So grab your ticket, take a seat, and remember, you are not on this journey alone. Today is a solo episode. So today I want to talk about something that doesn't generally get spoken about a lot. And that is what happens when you start to feel safe. What happens when you get to a point in your healing where you actually feel kind of okay? So sometimes when you're in survival mode, you're in fight or flight and you're in crisis, all of a sudden things could be calmer and you've started to understand yourself and you don't feel like you're automatically lighter. You don't feel, oh, well, I feel like I've worked on that, but why do I feel sad? Why do I feel flat? Why am I still feeling angry? And you know that you've gone through the journey of healing. You know that you've healed some part of yourself, but then sometimes something still feels like it's missing. And that can really, really mess with your head because it's like, hold on a minute, I'm doing the work. So why am I feeling like this? Why am I feeling worse in some cases? So if you have been feeling like that and you feel that it's odd, it's weird, and you don't understand it, it doesn't mean you're failing on your healing journey. It just can mean that your nervous system is starting to believe that you're safe enough to feel what you couldn't feel before. If that's the case, can we put a name on it? I don't know, but I'm going to try. In this episode, I'm going to talk about something called the quiet grief of healing. Now, who you were before you started healing, when you were lost, when you had changes to make that you wanted to kind of get yourself better, get yourself healed, get yourself on the train, as it were. So we are going to talk about the emotional impacts of trauma and loss, and we won't go into any graphic detail, but if you do notice yourself kind of getting activated, so you get tight chest or racing thoughts, or you even kind of get any kind of triggers, then just pause the episode, take a breath, look around the room, maybe do some grounding techniques, and then come back when you feel okay. You don't have to push through anything. You're literally here for me to help you get through these moments of doubt. So we will take this lightly and steady. If you do need to pause at any point, it's absolutely fine. When people talk about grief, your automatic kind of go-to is bereavement, isn't it? Like you think of a loved one that might have died, you think of funerals, you think of really big losses. But grief is it's a lot bigger than that. It's what happens when you're meeting the truth of what something cost you. And when it does come to trauma, like long-term stresses and the loss of something, maybe it was a big event that happened to you and your life changed as a result of it. The grief of losing who you once were, the grief of losing your identity can be quite extreme, enormous. So if you are in survival mode, your system is busy. It's busy keeping you going. It's getting you through what it needs to get you through. And sometimes that means that if you are in fight or flight, your body is kind of numbing the emotions. You're bypassing what you really, really need to feel in that time. That's not to say that you're kind of in denial of what you're feeling. It's not to say you're broken, but our bodies are so clever in giving us exactly what we need when we need it. So if your system then goes into fight or flight and you think you can deal with something, but your system's saying, no, 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 you can't deal with that today. This thing that's just shown up for you is not for you. We need to park that. We will come back to that when we are in a safer place. This could be something that you can resonate with. This could be something that you relate to. So kind of when your feelings are like, oh, yeah, no, I was overwhelmed by this, or I was overwhelmed by that, or I can't deal with that today. That is something that I do say. I was like, no, I'm done. I am done. Cannot add that to my plate. So when we start to heal and we go through something and there's quiet, we also don't understand how to deal with that because we're so busy being in this survival mode that we can't figure out how to go to the next step. So people seek out therapy, they do some self work, and when they have these breakthroughs, the feelings show up. And you might think, why now? Why should I start feeling this grief now? Because I was feeling good. I don't want to feel the feelings of sadness, the feelings of grief. And especially when you feel like you're safe, you're in a safe place. So grief is not proof that you're going backwards. It's not that you're failing. Grief, sorry, can be proof that you're no longer numb. Grief can be proof that you are integrating into your new self. Integrating can feel quite messy. If you've been quietly emotional lately, or you've been grieving in a way that you can't quite name, let's go through some concepts and let's try and name these together. When we think of healing and we think of grief, we think of 5 common ways that we heal. You might relate to one, you might relate to all of them, you might relate to none of them. If there is anything that you think that I haven't said, then please put it in the comments below. If you do resonate with one or all of these, drop me a DM on Instagram at Riding the Trauma Train and we can chat about it. If when I do read these out, if you get a wave of emotion, that's not a problem. That is just your truth showing up. So 1, grieving the version of you who had to survive. So sometimes we grieve the younger you, the one who had to be brave too soon, the one who adapted, the one who became small or tough or invisible or perfect, or you had to be useful or funny just to stay safe. And that part of healing is realizing I didn't choose that. I didn't need that. You might grieve about how much you carried. What you can tell yourself is, I'm grieving how early I learned to be quiet. This is the grief of the life that might have been. So it's not always loud. It can always show up. It can show up as strange sadness when you see someone living a life that you wanted, or when you hit an age milestone, or when you realize you've been in survival mode for years. The grief might sound something like, I thought I'd be happier by now. I thought I'd feel more secure. I thought I'd have built a very different life. Now, that doesn't mean you're ungrateful for what you do have. It means you're human. You can love your life and still mourn what didn't happen. 3, grieving lost time. This one can bring up anger as well as sadness. Lost time can mean years spent coping, years spent being anxious, years spent in relationships that just drained you. Now, this doesn't have to be relationships that are lover relationships. This could be friendships. This could be work colleagues. This could be family members that isn't necessarily a partner. So those relationships drained you, and years spent not knowing you were allowed to want more. And people often feel guilty for grieving time because it can sound like, I'm behind. But grief doesn't mean behind. It means that mattered, that cost me something. And if your body could speak, it might say, I'm tired from how long I held my breath. 4, grieving relationships you outgrew or had to leave. Healing can change your boundaries, your standards, and your self-respect. And that can change who fits in your life. So sometimes you grieve people you still love, but you can't stay close to. Sometimes you grieve the idea of who they could have been. Sometimes you grieve the version of you who stayed too long. So this could be true in friendships. You say you are friends with someone that for many, many years as children, and then as you grow into adulthood, your paths go a different way. Now, you could be grieving the fact that they've moved on to do something else and you're still, I don't know, in the same hometown, doing the same thing you did when you left school, but you had visions of doing something else. But actually, because that person has outgrown you, you're grieving that relationship. You're grieving also what you wanted but didn't go and get. Okay, so if we think of it in terms of relationships, and you're the one that has decided, actually, I've outgrown this relationship, I need to move on. So you think to yourself, well, why am I still sad? I'm the one that left. Why am I sad? Leaving isn't always a celebration, and you have a relationship to grieve over. Sometimes you choose that heartbreak for your own safety. And 5, grieving the identity you used to survive. This is a big one that doesn't get talked about enough. Trauma can bring up identities like the caretaker, the achiever, the I'm always fine, the peacekeeper. Oh my gosh, the peacekeeper. And then the one who says, I don't need anything, and the one who pushes on, coping on their own. So those identities are formed within that healing journey and within that survival mode. So you've got the healing side of you and you've got the survival side of you, and they're kind of on the same train, but one wheel's going a little bit faster than the other, and the other one keeps pausing. What do you do in that concept? When you do start healing, the concept of those wheels are starting to align, but it also makes you feel a little bit confused because you don't know what your identity is in that moment, because your survival mode is kind of breaking down and you're going through your healing. So how do the two marry up? How do you get to that point when you cannot identify your new self, your new identity? When you start healing, these trauma identities can start to soften. And when they start to soften, and you don't really know who you are yet, if you are the person that is always been there for everybody else, you're the person that you're the go-to. Somebody is going through something, they give you a call. Something happened, and it's like, oh, come on, text. They'll come round. I know they can help me. You are seen as the person who advises everybody, or you're seen as the person that is the fix-it person. Yet actually, when you are learning your new identity from going through your healing journey, your grief might show up in things like, but I'm the strong one. I need to be the strong one. And if I'm not the strong one, who am I? If I'm not the one that people lean on, who am I? If I don't show up for others, what's my identity? So if I stop fixing everything for everybody else, will they still see me in the same way? If I keep fixing things for other people, or if I stop fixing things for other people, will they still show up as my friends? Will they still show up in my relationship? And the other identity in trauma is that you are the person that, because you don't stop, you're always keeping yourself busy because you're always in survival mode. You think that stopping is going to make you fall apart. You think that resting is not good for you, when actually rest is what you need. Your nervous system has been in fight or flight for so long that the energy that it takes to go through that, you need even more rest than you actually think. If your grief shows up in these ways, if your trauma identity and your grief of that identity are kind of hand in hand, what is happening? So none of those things are wrong. None of those things are weakness. It's literally your nervous system, because it's been in that survival mode for so long, it has been able to keep you safe. What it's doing now is it's learning a new way. The same as you are, your nervous system is learning a new way to live. Okay, so we've just gone through the 5 common things that we grieve in healing. I'm just going to run through them. We went through grieving the version of you who had to survive, grieving the parallel life that you thought you'd have, grieving lost time, grieving relationships that you outgrew or had to leave, and grieving the identity that you used to survive. If any of those landed with you and you want to have a little check-in, well, let's do a check-in now. So just place your hand somewhere safe, on your heart, on your chest, on your belly. Take one big breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Okay, just to ground you, just to let your nervous system know that you are here in the present. Okay. Why do we think that grief can feel like we're going backwards. This is the part when we're in our healing journey, and obviously healing isn't linear, let's not forget that, but we're moving forwards and moving forwards and moving forwards. And then when we hit that grief moment in our healing journey and we go through any of those 5 episodes, we then think we're going backwards. And that's when people start to panic. And when they panic, it's because the grief that you're going through, or the quiet grief, which is related to the trauma, is crying more, feeling less motivated, being easily triggered, thinking about the past, and needing more rest and feeling raw. Now, going back to what I was just saying, that when you go through those grief episodes and you feel like you don't want to slow down because you don't want to feel, it's really difficult. You need more rest because your body is in survival mode even more. So it's fighting the feelings of feeling unsafe. And when you go through a grief episode and the mind goes, see, I'm back here again. And you feel like that you're going backwards when in fact you'll go through that kind of emotion and that feeling probably quicker than you did the last time. And actually, there is no straight line. Think of it like healing is more like changing tracks. Sometimes you think you've left the trauma training entirely and you hear the whistle again, with sensation and memory, and you just think you're way back on it. But often what's really happening is you've just moved to a different carriage. If we think of it in riding the trauma train, you are on this one carriage, and this is the carriage where you have kept yourself busy for so long and you literally don't give yourself any space. You've got A, B, C, and D all lined up. And as soon as you get to D, you've already got E, F, G, H. Let's think about that then. E, F, G, H are already lined up to go. When you go through your healing process and then you go into your grief episode, it's basically you're just changing carriage. You're going from carriage A to carriage B. And when you get to carriage B, your body is now saying, okay, now we can process. And that processing feeling is really uncomfortable. And that's why we relate it to grief, because we can process. And from processing that feeling, it's uncomfortable. And that is like grief. Like, grief is there. You understand the concept of grief. So when you think of grief within trauma, you're uncomfortable. Your whole body is just, you feel almost bruised. And the thing is, because you've gone on this journey, you've changed carriage, you might start then grieving old coping mechanisms. Now, this could be food, this could be exercise, this could be alcohol, this could be sex. Any one of these things could be something that you had as a familiar coping mechanism. You might be somebody that actually not only did you use things like that, but used work. So if you used to feel numb or used to overwork or used to people please, letting go of those patterns can feel like losing something, because in a strange way, those patterns once kept you safe. If you miss the old armor, it doesn't mean you want to suffer. It means you're learning new ways of being in the world. Let me repeat that. It doesn't mean you want to suffer. It means you're learning a new way of being in the world. There are a few misconceptions that can creep in when grief shows up during healing. And this isn't to judge yourself, but it's to gently untangle what's true. Now, one misconception is, if I'm healing, I shouldn't feel like this. Well, what is that feeling? Why shouldn't you feel like that? Healing doesn't mean that you stop feeling loss. Sometimes feeling grief is just a sign that you're finally safe enough to process it. Rather than thinking of it, if I'm healing, I shouldn't feel like it. Reframe it. This feeling doesn't mean I'm failing. It means something is moving. This feeling doesn't mean I'm failing. It means something is moving. And I've done a whole episode on this. I should be over it by now. Now, where is the timeline? Who gives us that timeline that we need to be over something? Now, people say if you get out of a relationship, you'll be over it in 6 months. What if something from that relationship meant that actually every time you listen to a song, you felt heartbreak again? You're not going to be over something in that short amount of time. Then also you've got the concept of, if something happened to you as a child and you've done lots of work, you've done lots of healing, and you think, yeah, I should be over that by now. It's like saying, how long is a piece of string? It's exactly the same from healing from trauma. There is no correct timeline for it. And that is usually the pressure that comes with the part of you that's trying to regain control again, the part of you that is confused and trying to almost keep attached to that survival mode because that's all you've ever known. What we need to do is we need to reframe that, and reframing that I should be over it by now is I'm allowed to take the time my body needs. I'm allowed to take the time my body needs. Just let that sit with you for a second. Misconception number 3, and I think we did touch on this briefly a minute ago, which is this means I'm going backwards. No, you cannot go backwards. You've done this amount of work. Yes, it might feel like you're going backwards, but you're not. This is literally for every 2 steps forward, you may go a step back, but you're never going to go 2 steps back. You can't go back to the beginning of your healing journey because you've already done so much work. When we say healing isn't linear, that's what we mean. It means like it is going to go up and down like a heartbeat monitor. It is going to go up and down like, I don't know, Mount Kilimanjaro. But rather than saying to yourself, this means I'm going backwards, if you reframe it, this is a wave, not a verdict. This is a wave, not a verdict. Same as this is a marathon, not a sprint. The same kind of concept applies here. Okay, and lastly, misconception 4 is if I let myself feel this, it will eat me up. Now, if it does make sense that that would scare you. It does make sense that you would think, oh my gosh, I really don't want to feel those feelings. But you don't have to meet those feelings as a whole. Meet them in small doses. Okay, think of it this way. If you let yourself feel a feeling and you think it's going to eat you up, actually, think of it in crumbs. You've got this giant cookie and that is your feeling. Now, you're not going to be able to eat that cookie in one sitting, are you? So you can pick at it. You can eat your cookie, you can eat the crumbs, you can eat the outside, you can chop it in half, chop it into quarters. But instead of thinking to yourself, if I let myself feel this, it is going to eat me up, reframe your mind and be like, I can do this in teaspoons, or I can do this in crumbs. Okay. Just show up for yourself. Show up for the feeling that you have. Break it down if you need to. And know that there are different types of grief episodes that you go through when you are healing. What I would like to do now is I'd like to do 4 gentle practices for moving through this grief safely. These are simple, they're not fix-it tools, but they offer you to kind of ground yourself. Practice 1, name the loss. Don't go into the entire story. Don't go through the entire memory box that you have in relation to your healing, but just name that loss. I'm grieving the years I spent surviving. I'm grieving the version of me that didn't feel safe. I'm grieving what I didn't get. You're not opening every single door. You are just naming what is here in this particular moment. Another practice you can do is the both and statements. This is really powerful when you feel conflicted. One example is I'm proud of how far I've come and I'm sad about what it cost. I'm grateful for my growth and I'm angry it had to happen this way. I'm safer now and I'm still tender. Both of these can be true. Okay, practice number 3, and it's a tiny ritual. It's about 2 minutes. You don't do like this big ceremony, you just pick a small moment of respect. You could light a candle, you could hold a warm drink, you can put your hand on your heart like we did earlier, or you can actually step outside and take in some lovely fresh air. And if you do that, when you do any of these things, simply say, this mattered, I mattered. That's it. That is it in a nutshell. You pick one of those things and then you just say, this mattered, I mattered. And that's a really powerful moment. Another one that I think I've heard a lot of people say on the podcast is to put your hand on your chest or on your heart and say, I am safe. Now that to me is such a powerful one. And then finally, practice number 4. This is a compassionate moment for the earlier use. Ask, what does she need and what didn't she get? If you choose one once more for today. Let's think, what did she need that she didn't get? Asking for help. Okay. When you're rebuilding trust, you're teaching your system, I'm here now. When you're going through this moment and you don't know what to feel, look around you and name 3 neutral things you can see. Just to remind your body, I'm here, it's now. I'm here, it's now. I'm in my studio and I can see a candle. Don't worry, it's not lit. I can see my cup. I can see my screen. I've also got some random stuff like a nail file, a hair clip, some nails yard, women's balance, ready to roll on thing on my temple, some glasses. There are so many train behind me, obviously not real train, the riding the trauma train, little ornament. I'm just saying that just in case you're listening and not watching. There are lots of things around me that I can look at to get me back to this moment. And it's really interesting to think of the concept of grief in a trauma way, but in the trauma way, it's the loss of something you didn't have or the loss of something that you had that went, which is grief, isn't it? If you think about grief in a way that is to do with losing a loved one or losing a loved pet, then that is if grief is showing up in your healing and you can feel it or going through one of those grief episodes, it doesn't mean you're failing. It may mean you're finally safe enough to feel what was kind of on pause or what was on postponed to a later date. And I know it can feel like a weight is on your shoulder. It can feel really, really heavy because actually now you're going to feel the feelings. But it can also be a sign that you're coming back to yourself or you're coming into your new self and not the survival self, but the you that's actually in there underneath all this survival. Here's my conductor's question for you. Now, I know I like to ask this to my guests, but I'd like to leave it here for you. I would love you to either answer it in your head or write it down. If you could sit beside the version of you who first boarded the trauma train, the one who did what she did to survive, what would you say to her today with all the tenderness that you've earned? And if the only thing you can say is, I'm here now, that still counts. If this episode helped, send it to somebody who's quietly carrying a lot. And if you'd like more support like this, follow, subscribe so you don't have to do this alone. Follow Riding the Trauma Train wherever you're listening so you can join us at the next stop. Until next time, take care. Thank you so much for joining me today on Riding the Trauma Train. I'm Lydia and I feel privileged to share this space with you. No matter where you are on this train right now, whether it's in survival mode, slowly finding your feet in recovery, or maybe it's somewhere in between, remember you are not alone in what you're feeling and you do not have to travel this journey by yourself. So if you'd like to continue traveling together, please follow Riding the Trauma Train wherever you're listening so you can join us at the next stop. Until next time, take care.